Okay, this is still a continuation of sound rule number 7. What's that I hear? On the 19th of May, 1993, we got an interview with Dave Von Ronk. We're still running a 30 hertz center track pilot tone, half track mono, and a head tone of minus 8 dBm is equal to 0 VU. Should already have that, so I'm not going to do that. For the
What I'd like you to do is to have you just talk to Michael, look at Michael.
Okay.
Okay, camera roll number 15 on sound roll number 7. This is the beginning. Camera roll number 15 on sound roll 7, beginning of interview with Dave Von Ronk. I'll run 15.
Oh, do one last thing. Roll. Okay, Omar. Go ahead and mark it.
Roll 15, take 1.
Okay. Dave, why don't you talk about your earliest musical interests? What started you on the path of making music your livelihood?
I always wanted to be a musician, I think. That is, when I was about 7 or 8, maybe a little older, 9 or 10. I started. Okay.
How can you do it alone?
Yeah, I could either use a little more closeness with the microphone or a little more volume to me.
Well, we'll try it with the volume.
So you can adjust it if you want.
Okay.
Sounds good. Just a clap. Mark it. Sure. Thank you.
I always wanted to be a musician, I think. That is, what does a 9-year-old kid know? But I started to sing. Actually, even before that, when I was in first grade, I was the only kid in the school who knew the second verse to the Star Spangled Banner. And so they paraded me around the school from class to class to sing, "Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand." I was, needless to say, one of the most unpopular little kids in that damn school among the other kids, but I loved it. I ate it up. And when I was about 12, I took up the ukulele, and very shortly after that, the guitar, and then the banjo. And by that time, I'd been listening to jazz a great deal, and that's what I wanted to do, as I wanted to be a jazz musician. And being a singer at that point was sort of, the idea of it was sort of infra dignitatum. I had it in my head that real jazz musicians didn't sing, but it was quite evident by after a year or two that I wasn't going to make it as any kind of an instrumentalist. So I guess when I was 13, 14, that was when I played publicly the first time. Had a quartet, I guess it was. I played guitar, and there was myself and 3 other kids singing. And I remember the first gig I ever played was in Ridgewood, which is in Brooklyn, at a place called the Schwabenhall, which is a German fraternal organization. And our fee was all the beer we could drink. You'd be amazed at how much beer a 13-year-old kid can drink don't remember a thing. I'm told I was carried home. uh, and we were doing at that time actually some folk music because the Weavers were popular at that point. And of course, we knew Tsena Tsena, and we knew Irene Goodnight, and So Long It's Been Good to Know You, and so on. We were doing that material. We were also doing a lot of barbershop quartet kind of thing, which has stood me in very good stead. And it was singing in barbershop quartet was sort of a seat of the pants solfeggio education. I learned to sing all kinds of chords and intervals that I didn't even know existed at that point. And I was singing diminished and augmenteds and ninths and thirteenths and all that kind of thing without having the foggiest idea what it was that I was singing. And to this day, I find my music is influenced by those barbershop quartet harmonies, and my guitar arrangements especially. So I trundled off to be a jazz musician. I switched over to tenor banjo, which I played execrably. Really, I was one of the worst. And that on tenor banjo, to be the worst, you're really competing. It's a fast track. And I worked with pickup traditional jazz groups. Mostly, I think I was getting the work because a lot of people who played jazz at that point, and I think to this day, still think that real jazz musicians don't sing. I didn't mind taking vocals, so I was band vocalist, and they sort of, as Eddie Condon said, let me hold my banjo. The folk music thing, as such, didn't occur until a bit later. I was collecting old jazz records as much as I could, and you'd get.
Okay. We just switch the magazine.
Transcription's rolling on number. No, if you can't hear Dave, it's only a postcard, right?
Yeah, without pictures, we get divorced.
Okay, 3 up. And I'm gonna have to change roles in the middle of this. Huh? 16.
Say when?
When?
Speed.
Mark it.
16, take 3.
Why don't we pick up with the move into the folk genre?
So I was collecting jazz records, and at that point you couldn't get too much jazz on LP, not the old stuff that I was interested in. What you had to do is you had to go out and look for the old 78s, and there were a couple of places in New York at that time that you could find them, and the same places that would sell Sidney Bechet, Clarence Williams' Blue 5, Jelly Roll Morton's Red Hot Peppers would also be selling in the same bins Mississippi John Hurt, or we were just talking Big Bill Broonzy, and that kind of thing. And these things were not expensive. So what have you got to lose for a quarter?
Were you winging it?
That kind of thing, to some degree, yeah. And so I started to listen to people like Furry Lewis. Some of it was reissued. I remember hearing Furry Lewis on a 10-inch LP called Listen to Our Story, where he sang Stackley or something like that. And so I got more and more interested in the blues, per se, the country blues. And I started to try to do that as well. I mean, I had no idea that there was a folk music revival right around the corner, and that that what I was doing was a sort of an exercise in pre-adaptation or anything like that. But that's just how it did turn out. When the folk music thing started to happen in the late 50s, there I was with my guitar and kind of rudimentary finger-picking technique, and I know a whole bunch of old blues, and also I had an advantage in that I knew a lot of old jazz material too. So, I just recently heard a tape. It was made to me around 1957 or something like that. And I'm doing a Grant and Wilson old vaudeville team thing. If you miss me here, you can find me at the Greasy Spoon. This is a piece of material you didn't hear every day. And I had a lot of stuff like that as well, and dozens of Bessie Smith tunes and all that kind of thing that I could sort of fit into this finger picking and country blues format, which gave me, I think, something of a jump start at that point. Folk music per se, I didn't do all that much. Straight folk music, of course, I was hanging around with other people who were very much doing straight folk music. And I learned a lot of those songs just through osmosis. And later on, when I started to perform, I used that material too, of course. I'd be crazy if I didn't. But always, I thought of myself as a jazz singer monkey, and I still do.
Who were your friends and teachers? I use teacher informally. Where'd you pick up repertoire from in the 50s? Was it all off of records?
A lot of it was from records, but not entirely all. One thing is there was a community of like-minded people of roughly the same age, and we were always getting material from each other. So that a great deal of the things that I learned at that time, I learned from friends. However, they might have gotten it is another story. But we sort of established a second round of oral tradition transmission at that point. There were opportunities to learn from some of the old timers too, not too many early on, because before the folk music revival really took hold, there was no reason for the old timers to come to New York, and we weren't traveling all that much. But certainly Gary Davis, for example, lived in New York, and at that point so did Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry, who live in New York. And you got a chance to hear Josh White from time to time live, and that kind of thing. And those are opportunities that I really took advantage of as much as I could.
You mentioned Gary Davis.
Excuse me, I have to change the
Please go change the audio tape.
Mm-hmm.
This is the end of sound roll number 7. End of sound roll 7. Continuing with camera roll number 16.
No. Stay put. All I have to do is change my foot. I just had
Again, the start of sound roll number 8, camera roll number 16. Continuing interview with Von Ronk. Okay. And
There you go. Mark.
4.
Hey, Dave, Gary Davis, who you mentioned a moment ago, was an influence on yours. Why don't you tell the viewing audience, who was Gary Davis?
well, Reverend Gary Davis.
Reverend Gary Davis.
He was indeed an ordained minister. Recorded and was generally known under the name of Blind Gary Davis. He was blind. He had been a street singer and preacher for most of his life. And he was from South Carolina originally. And when I first heard him, I guess it was around 1955, 54, 55, he was still working on the streets of Harlem, performing, and he also used to preach on Sundays in a storefront church up in Harlem. His sermons were really remarkable. That is, he was an incredibly gifted and complex guitar player, and he would do his sermons in this recitative, accompanied by the guitar. And he'd set up a riff on the guitar, and then he'd be sort of chanting and counterpoint to the riff, and he'd make a little change in what he was saying, and do another little change on the guitar, and so on. This constant interplay and interweaving of voice and guitar, and the rhythms, the polyrhythms that would result from this interplay is really fantastic. I've never heard anyone do anything quite like that before or since. He was a very good singer. If I were to compare him to anyone at all, I would, as a singer, compare him somewhat to Ray Charles, both in voice quality and in style of playing. His guitar playing, as I said, is very complicated and very ragged, or ragtimey, actually, not terrifically bluesy at all. And he had unbelievable technique as a guitarist. The man was a genius. He truly was. And what made it even better was he was accessible. I met him through a friend of his and a friend of mine, Barry Kornfeld, who was studying guitar with him, and brought him down to Washington Square in Greenwich Village, where they used to have singers used to congregate on Sunday afternoons. And that's where I first met and saw and heard Gary. We became pretty good friends over the years, and I worked with him, as soon as there was any work. I worked with him as often as I possibly could. And I never took formal lessons from him, but we used to sit around, and he would very, very happily show you anything that you wanted to learn from his, well, he used to say, well, playing guitar ain't nothing but a bag of tricks. Well, yeah, I suppose, but he had a very big bag. And he was perfectly happy to share that bag of tricks of his with anybody who asked him. Although occasionally you'd get a little upset. He'd spend hours showing you something, and you'd finally get it down. And you're stealing my stuff. So you couldn't win. So I learned a great deal from Gary. I still do a few of his songs, but the bulk of what I learned from Gary is embedded in my, just my whole approach to the instrument.
Another mentor of yours I read about is Paul Clayton.
Ah,
Talk a little bit about Paul.
Pablo. Yeah, well, Paul was a folk singer, and he sang old-timey folk songs. That's how he would have put it. And he was also a collector of folk songs. He collected Done Laid Around, Done Stayed Around, This Old Town Too Long. That first came to light through one of his collecting trips. And that thing of mine that we were talking about before, Duncan and Brady, that's one that Paul also collected. He was a brilliantly intelligent man, and he had really thought a lot of musical questions through rather carefully. I didn't sing anything like Paul, but a very smooth, almost Burl Ivesy kind of voice. He was a nice, rich baritone kind of, mid-range baritone voice, and not much of an instrumentalist. But what Paul had going for him as a musician was that he was a great phraser, and his phrasing was quite unlike anyone else's. He had a way of reading a lyric where you really felt that he was talking to you. In another field, in a totally different way, Frank Sinatra has that same skill. He's a great reader of lyrics, and Paul was also a marvelous guy to go out and have a few drinks with and talk and argue and debate, and he was an incredibly funny man.
Ongoing debates about what?
Oh, I can remember.
How we're changing. If there was a